From You Are My Rock to Erasure. How coaching ideology and workplace land can slowly recode love into threat. This was not a sudden collapse. It was a progressive emotional inversion. What makes this story hard to explain is not the ending, but the sequence of emotional states that came before it. Love did not simply disappear. It changed shape repeatedly, and each shift carried consequences for the person left inside the relationship. By mapping those shifts alongside coaching ideology and workplace reinforcement, a clearer pattern emerges. This was not confusion. It was transition. Phase 1, love with stability, then love reinterpreted, late 2020 to early 2021. In December 2020, I was told I was her rock. In March 2021, she said she would marry me all over again. That is love with security. Not obligation. Not habit. Attachment with reassurance. But this is where reinterpretation begins. Coaching frameworks introduced through Workplace Land do not attack love directly. They quietly relabel it. Stability becomes stagnation. Reliability becomes lack of growth. Being needed becomes being relied upon. So love remains, but it is now held under suspicion. From my side, nothing had changed. I was still showing up, supporting, anchoring. From her side, the meaning of those same behaviors was shifting. This is the first asymmetry. One person living continuity, the other living reinterpretation. Phase 2, love turns defensive, then hostile, mid-2021. By June 2021, love had not vanished, but it had become conflicted. This is where the affair begins. Affairs that happen in this context are not expressions of freedom. They are attempts to resolve internal tension without confronting reality. The emotional tone toward me began to harden. Not indifference, but irritation, resentment, fault-finding, love expressed through frustration, then blame. This is where love can look like hate. Not because the person despises you, but because you now represent what contradicts the new story. Your presence challenges the emerging identity. From my side, this was deeply destabilizing. The person who had affirmed me months earlier now spoke as if I were an obstacle. There was no clear explanation, only escalating emotional distance. This is where self-doubt begins to take root. Phase 3, love with distance, love with guilt, late 2021 to early 2022. After the affair ended in September 2021, she did not detach. She moved out, but kept access to the home. Used the house for washing. Maintained emotional closeness. Stayed connected without commitment. This is love constrained by avoidance. She still cared. She still relied on me emotionally. But she could not stay, and she could not leave cleanly. In February 2022, she apologized for what she had done to me. That matters. It shows moral awareness had not vanished. But apologies without repair create a cruel paradox. They acknowledge harm while prolonging it. For me, this period was exhausting. Hope and grief coexisted. Love remained alive, but without reciprocity or clarity. The nervous system cannot stabilize in that space. This is where the slow psychological damage accumulates. Phase 4, love becomes inconvenient, then recast as pity, mid to late 2022. By August 2022, something decisive shifted. She reattached elsewhere. From that moment, my role changed abruptly. I was no longer a comfort. I became a liability to the new narrative. Contact narrowed to finances only. Emotional connection disappeared. I was ghosted. When she walked out the door for the last time in November 2022 and I told her I love her, she looked back with pity. That look matters. Pity is not care. It is not cruelty either. It is emotional distancing dressed as maturity. It allows someone to feel resolved without confronting what they are leaving behind. For me, that moment landed like erasure. Not anger. Not sadness. Displacement. Love had not been answered with rejection. It had been reframed as something outdated. Phase 5. Love is rewritten as problem, 2023 to 2024. Once distance was secured, the story had to be stabilized. In legal paperwork in 2023, my mental health was reframed as alleged depression, used offensively against my own documentation of depression and agoraphobia. This is not concern. It is narrative control. Love is now recast as dependency. Pain is reframed as pathology. Consistency becomes evidence of limitation. By January 2024, the rewrite was complete. A new relationship was announced, backdated, and we were urged to be adult about encounters for the sake of the children. At this point, love is no longer acknowledged as real. It becomes something that only existed because I was unwell, or because she didn't know better then. That is the final inversion. What this did to the person left behind. From my side, this was not a series of clean endings. It was a prolonged exposure to emotional contradiction. Love expressed, then withdrawn. Care shown, then withheld. Apologies given, then invalidated. Presence allowed, then erased. Each phase required adaptation. Each adaptation came with cost. By the time contact ceased entirely, I was not just grieving the relationship. I was recovering from prolonged psychological disorientation, where meaning was repeatedly withdrawn and replaced. Blocking contact was not bitterness. It was survival. The role of coaching and Land D. No single framework caused this, but coaching ideology and workplace endorsement provided the moral scaffolding that made it all defensible. They offered language that reframed harm as growth. They validated outcome over process. They rewarded reinterpretation rather than repair. And once the new identity settled, everyone who complicated the story quietly disappeared, including me. This was not a moment. When she said love ended in moments in time, she was closer to the truth than she knew. Love did not die in one moment. It was progressively transformed, then slowly disowned. And the person who lived the continuity was left carrying the cost of that transformation. That is the transition. That is the damage. And that is why the change feels so extreme.